I'll turn on the recording as well.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Now that we are live streaming, let me again state that this is a reconvening of the Friday, May 5th, 2023 Oversight Committee meeting of the Far West Texas Regional Public Defender Office. Now we do have a quorum, and we are beginning with the 4 remaining items on our agenda from May the 5th, starting off with the Chief's report. And I have granted leave to combine 5 and 6 on the agenda, Chief's report, and then review of the budget followed by the action portion of number 6. That being said, Mr. McDermott, go right ahead.
Judge, to repeat, since we're not recording or live streaming, I circulated my chief's report, the 51-page document, to the board. In that was county reports I presented to each county judge individually in person, except for Judge McKenzie, who graciously allowed me to meet with her by Zoom. Then I went over the situations in each county, what goes on with our caseload, what the obstacles and barriers are to moving cases, as well as the numbers for what I believed supported or were relevant for the budget. Regards to the budget that I constructed was my best effort to provide as good faith an approach as I could to a budget. There are different ways, different metrics for looking at our caseloads. As I presented to the board a month and a half ago, we have caseloads that are not sustainable at this point. And I believe that Mr. Ehlers from TIDC at that meeting, or last week, also recognized, or Jeff Burkhart at the meeting before that, recognized those caseloads were very high compared to what standards are that TIDC considers sustainable. I did not like to put a pause on cases. I have not done that in the 5.5 years that we've been open. In fact, for the members of the board who are not here when we started, I put this office at some prompting from Judge Ferguson on a fast track when I got hired in October of 2017. I started work on October 1st of 2017, and we started taking cases 75 days later. On December 15th of 2017, I was here in person at a Brewster County docket, taking appointments in court. We had no furniture, we had no computers, I had no staff, and I took cases. That is not a model that I think TIDC encourages anybody else in the state to do since I've done it. In fact, I think most offices wait 6 to 8 months now to build their infrastructure in order to take cases. But my commitment to the counties, which continues, is that I'm in partnership with the counties in order to provide the service. And I recognize that we live in a region that has no lawyers, that is poorer than many of the other regions in the state. And I've been very aware of that. Honestly, looking at the caseload and developing the caseload, it would have been warranted and probably necessary months earlier in order to put a pause on cases. Much to the arguments against my staff, who thought that we had too many cases, I kept pushing forward. I believe that in March, the decision was the correct one. Information I did not have at that meeting, that I found out afterwards, was that we actually had a backlog of intakes of about 40 intakes back to January that we had not completed. We have a statutory duty to complete intakes within a very short time period. And because of work, including 2 trials, we were behind. And that is not acceptable under the statutes, and it's not acceptable according to our duties of representation to our clients. So I believe at this point that decision was the correct one for our ability to ethically provide representation to our clients. There are not, as I put in my report, there is not a consistent way of application of caseload standards across the state. TIAC has, I think, struggled with that issue as well on how to develop and talk about caseloads. Offices that have been created after this have caseload standards written into the grant awards, I believe. Many of them do. And they enforce those pretty strongly in order to be able to use the dollars for what they were intended for. So what I did, and I laid out my different methodologies in my report. I looked at the TIDC current guidelines that are put out by the PPRI out of Texas A&M, which is the standards that TIDC usually looks at. I analyzed for you problems with that methodology in application, but still came to conclusion. I also looked at numbers that I believe are close to where we're going to be forthcoming from the American Bar Association. I believe that the numbers that came from either of those methodologies, and I did not, Judge Evans is going to be logging back in. He had to switch devices, but I will continue on until he does. He is aware of this conversation. I believe that using either of those methodologies, I could have in good faith come to this board and said, we need 7 to 10 attorneys. I believe the caseload supports it. The work that we're doing, the cases we're going to trial on are difficult. They are time consuming. They are the kind of cases that have to go to trial. And we take that job and our duties to our clients very seriously in that regard. I don't believe that anybody who has seen a single one of our trials since we have opened could say that any trial decision that we've made has been frivolous or unnecessary. In fact, and I want to thank Judge Urias here while he's here, we have had, I think, 4 jury trials in Culberson County, I think. And Judge Urias has come to watch each one of them. Maybe not the most exciting thing for a county judge who's got a lot of other things to do, but his presence in the courtroom has been very much appreciated by our office to see what we do in real time. And it is time consuming. It's a lot of work. I took those numbers and thought and did what I tell young lawyers who work for me to never do. And that is I negotiated against myself. I took those numbers and I knew the realities of my counties, the financial realities of my counties. I recognized the multiple ways that I have built an office that has built efficiencies into it that do not exist in any other office in the state. We have squeezed every way of building efficiencies in. Most offices in the state do not have lawyers show up to court and say, I've not been handling that case, but I have an announcement. Every judge in this room has had an experience. Every judge who we've appeared in front of has had an experience where the lawyer who's handling the case was not in the courtroom and the case got handled anyways. Because of the way that I've structured my office, we have never missed a court date. We have always had a substantive announcement on every case. And we have never filed to continue a jury trial when we had a set jury trial setting. That is in distinction to the private bar across the state. That is not true. And I think that is not how any other office, public defender's office in the state works. Because I knew that with limited resources, we still needed to put it plainly, get things done. I have used all those efficiencies, and based on either model, as I wrote in my report, I then discounted those models down to what I proposed. In fact, after meeting with each of the county judges, I will point out that in your reports that I initially presented to you, I suggested adding 3 lawyers, not 2. Those conversations that I had with each of the judges, I took deeply into account and brought those back into the office. And Judge Portillo in particular, we recognize how poor Presidio County is. And that was very important to me. Hearing the feedback from each of the judges, that coming back, the numbers that you have in front of you is a reduction of what I presented to each of you in your offices 2 weeks ago. I believe this is what is needed. What I wrote in the report is that we could continue with our current staffing, but at this point, I would have a date uncertain as to when we could take new cases. I believe that if we got the staffing that I'm proposing, I actually think it's a very conservative proposal. It is probably less than the numbers warrant, but it is my commitment to see what we can do with that to make it work. And so my commitment would be that if I was able to fill those positions, that if I would get funding for the positions and filled them, that we would start taking cases 100%. Because it's important for this office, and I think it's important for the counties. I'm happy to take questions on that, but I was asked by multiple judges, Judge Hennington among others, to support my request with actual data analysis. I believe that I went into that data analysis without preconceptions. I took methodologies without an idea of what results they would give and just tried to apply them as even-handedly as I could, and then looked at the results as they came out. As I have been telling the board since I believe our meeting last November, beginning of December, there is no point in adding positions if we can't fill them. Plain and simple. And we have not been able to fill the open position that TIDC is currently funding at 100%. We have not been able to fill that position adequately at $100,000. And I have included, for your comparison purposes, in the board report, both the El Paso attorney's pay scale that applies to both the prosecutors and the public defender's office in El Paso, as well as the Concho Valley salaries. I think that you need to see that to know what we're competing with. If people are willing to come to our region of the state, and we are more remote than either of those places, then people are going to be looking around. If they are looking at public defender's offices, and they are going to be looking around at where they're willing to work, there's a couple things they're going to notice. One, and this is what they ask salaries clear out. And if they can get a salary that is higher in El Paso or in Concho Valley, we're not going to compete, flat out. They're not going to come here. There's no question. The other issue is caseloads. With people are applying, they are not applying to come here. They are not looking at the world and saying, what I want is to find a job in the Big Bend. What they are looking at is, I want to find a job as a public defender, and they're looking at all the offices. And what they are going to see is what those caseloads are. And that's one for a first question they're going to ask. And when I talk about our current caseload, there's no reason for them to come here when they can look somewhere else. The situation is going to become more extreme. El Paso, I will point out for the pay scale, for example, for those of you in the Western counties who know our prosecutor in the Western counties and have seen him in person, he currently makes almost $170,000. And that is comparable to a person at the public defender's office there and what they're making. Those folks, if they were even to come here, what they're going to be looking to do is to get out. and salaries and caseloads are extremely important for retention. And those are all the factors that I brought into, as well as the county situations. In order to set the salaries appropriately for line staff, that means that salaries have to be readjusted up and down the scale. I believe that we have been underpaid from the beginning of this program. It has been a struggle to maintain this. I've been, and I'm going to say this again, I've said this every meeting, probably since I've hired Mr. Chambers. I'm lucky to have him. Mr. Chambers was going to leave very close. And I am not ashamed to admit that the relief that I felt when Mr. Chambers decided not to leave us in October brought me to tears, because I could not have handled the caseload or the trials that we've done this spring without him. We are in a situation when we talk about efficiencies of the office and caseloads, the way that we have been able to continue to show up at dockets, and Judge Ferguson sees us at this point probably 6 times a month in court. We are able to do that because my investigators and my social workers prepare the dockets. They are working with the clients. They make sure that they're appearing. They are doing more than that. They are reviewing the indictments. They are reviewing the discovery and telling Paul and me and Taylor what we need to know and what we need to pay attention to, so that when we're reviewing the discovery ourselves, that we are able to do so more efficiently. So we are able to squeeze out efficiencies by doing that. And I'm saying that in a public meeting that is being recorded and live streamed, that in fact, much of the work that lawyers need to do in this office are being done for 1/3 of the cost by our support staff. That is also not that I'm exceedingly grateful for it. It is not a model for sustainability. We could not do this work without our social workers, who continue to work with our significantly mentally ill clients to make sure they get stable, they're appropriate for court, that they are able to comply with probation. Every jail in the region relies on us, relies on our social workers to work with our mentally ill clients who are in jail. Every one of them. They don't call me. They call our social workers. They call for intervention. They call for attention. The service to the county and to our clients that the social workers provide is immeasurable. That started from a grant from TIDC, from money that was dedicated for mental health. One of those social workers is still currently being paid 100% by TIDC. The other one is folded into our main grant, I believe, Mr. Colfax, if that's correct. And so the cost of the counties for a service that I believe is immeasurable is the cost of the counties is minimal. I know, Judge Portillo, and you're not aware of this, but there have been some significant cases that we have had in Marfa with people that Judge, your predecessor, relied on us in order to get the situation stable and enough for the cases to move and for her to be able to do her job. You have not seen that yet. But I expect any of the judges who have been sitting on the bench for a while have seen the effect of that. I am proud of the budget that I've written. And I believe that the work of this office has been important. I believe the work of this office has become a model across the state. It should not be that way, right? Like, perched out here in West Texas, people don't pay attention to us. But when I show up places, and I'm invited to things. There is a national interview that Paul and I gave a month ago and started to air last week. And we are getting calls from across the country already asking questions about what we have said and what we're doing out here. The attention that this community, these counties are getting because of this work, I'm proud of. And I'm proud of the budget that I've written because I believe it is necessary for us to be able to continue doing this work in an appropriate way under the law.
Does that conclude your chief's report?
Yes, sir.
All right, any questions for Mr. McDermott on the chief's report? If so, raise your hand so I can see. All right, I don't see any questions. Thank you, Mr. McDermott. Let's move on to review and adoption of the budget discussion and action. Have you given the preliminary remarks you want to give on number 6 for the budget, Mr. McDermott?
Judge, the proposed budget, there are 3 pages if you look at your PDF. If you open the bookmarks that should open on the right side, it should have a label for each one. If you don't, they are on pages 49, 50, and 51. Page 49 is the general budget. It takes into account the 3 different grants that we're working on. It's a budget that generally covers everything. This is often what budgets look like in the meeting book at TIDC for their board meetings. Not, I think, what programs submit to TIDC, but how they include them in the board meeting. There is a page 50 is the salary proposals that includes the fringe benefits. As I have noted in the report, and I think that it needs to be said out loud, another thing that lawyers are looking for when they are applying for jobs is loan repayment assistance. There are programs in the state, I believe that some of which do get TIDC funding that pay student loan repayments in their to their employees, to their attorneys. We do not have that. Student loan repayment is usually a tax-free benefit. I believe the salaries here would reflect appropriately the way that could attract employees, given that we do not provide student loan repayment. Page 51 is the breakdown of the non-personnel costs. There are increases in many of the categories because costs have gone up. I sat down, there were a couple of mistakes in the budgets in the past that I did not become aware of until this last year, usually because our expenditures were not as high as our budget was. There's been a miscalculation. I'm not sure where it came from in the TDs, in the retirement pension system. And so that was fixed on page 49 or on page 50. On page 51, everything has gone up in price. Legal research, copier, and I sat down and did an itemization of everything that we're spending now. There is an item that I've not included that I was going to talk to Mr. Colfax and Mr. Ehlers about another time. There is a company out there that is working with many public defenders' offices that is doing basically transcription of videos. We spend an immense amount of time in the office with the investigators doing transcriptions of videos when we're getting ready for trial. And that is something out there that's not included in this budget. But all of our costs have gone up. And so I've done a review of everything that we're actually spending, what those bills are, and written this to include those. And that's, but I believe those numbers are out there and have been available. I believe I included a version of all these pages to each of the county judges when I met with them individually 2 weeks ago. That also, I will point out, for transparency's sake, that my suggested salary for myself given what I think is being paid in other offices and given the structure that I need for the office in order to be able to recruit, I believe that my salary would be just and appropriate to be set at 180. I believe that Mr. Chambers deserves a much higher salary than he's being paid. If many of you not aware of the cutting edge work that we have been doing at automation, in order to also squeeze other levels of efficiency, the next level, and Mr. Chambers has been the one doing all of that for the office, including helping the courts. The next step for that is that we are receiving our appointment orders automated generally from the courts, with all the information. What Paul is working on this summer is to build a system that will pull that information when it comes in the email and automatically open the case in the database, automatically open a file in our electronic file system. And that will save more time. And those are the kind of efficiencies that we're doing. And so the salaries, I believe, are set at appropriate levels in my proposal.
All right, we're going to go around for questions. I want to throw the first one out there. I'm looking on page 51. 1, 2, 3, 4. Fifth line from the bottom says rent utilities and has a $1 million.
I'm sorry, that
item.
shouldn't.
What is that?
Right, that shouldn't be there. I meant to take that out. We do not currently have a line item for rent and utilities. Brewster County has been providing that in kind as part of their contribution to the office. We have gone to look in preparation over the last several months and talking to a realtor to see what is available both for rent or for rent to start with. And there's basically nothing available for rent in the area that would be appropriate commercial space at all. If there was a building that was a placeholder to say that for the program to have a building that was purchased and to be built out appropriately is an estimate of $1 million, but that's not included in the budget that I have proposed. That's just a placeholder for appropriate discussion.
All right, thank you. If I could ask another question about page 50 in your book. I'm trying to understand the column differences. The column on the right is the difference from 2023. Is that total including TIDC grant and local contribution, or is that just one or the other?
That's total combined.
All right, so, okay.
The breakdown for the state contributions is shown on the general ledger on page 49.
The reason I asked was on the page prior, page 49, it shows the total increase in budget that you're seeking is roughly $151,000. Am I reading that correctly?
Where are you located? I'm looking at
page 49, the bottom rightmost number.
Let me see.
150,897. Is that the amount of difference between what you're asking now and what is approved for the current budget?
That is a 1,571,000, Judge.
No.
Page
Page 49.
Can I answer that question for you, Judge?
Sure.
That is the difference between what the budget would be with the COLA at 5% and the proposed budget that Mr. McDermott was talking about. So that's the difference between the 224,1114 and the 380 on that budget.
Okay, that answers my question. So the actual difference is more like 180, or roughly 180 over the first column, which is the actual budget, and what you're asking on the current budget, correct?
That's
Yes.
correct.
Okay. I couldn't figure out how you could add two salaries totaling 240,000 and only add 150,000 to the budget, but now I got it. All right, thank you. That's all of my questions. Who has questions? Well, first of all, I guess I need to follow the proper procedure. Are there any motions to be considered at this time?
I move to accept the budget as it stands.
All right, I have a motion to accept. Is there a second?
I second.
Judge Abels with a second. Now we have a motion and a second. It is time for discussion. So let's have our discussion. Who wants to go first?
I'm good to go, Judge.
Go ahead, Judge Adias.
I've discussed the budget with Mr. McDermott, and we'll do our part. Cumberland County is solid behind this, the public defenders, and we'll do our part. I'm good to go.
Thanks for the comments, Judge. Judge McKenzie, you activated your, oh, no, Judge Evans unmuted first. Go ahead, Judge Evans.
Yes, Judge, as I was speaking with you guys yesterday in our probation meeting, I'd like to see us get more involved in the ability to charge on our fines from our prosecutor counties, the county and district court on pretrial diversions, as we discussed, in order for the counties to recoup some partial of the payment for the jails, for the other situations that these defendants have caused, because our county taxpayers haven't messed up and been thrown in jail. They shouldn't be affording the brunt of this situation of this budget increase. We should be able to go to the defendants and set up payment schedules with them in order for us to recoup most as much as possible of the cost to the counties for this public defender's office. So
Go ahead, Judge.
that's kind of a statement and a question. What we discussed part of the possibility, and with the assistance of your office and training our county attorneys, prosecuting attorneys, in order to help these counties out with their budgets. So is that a possibility?
Anyone want to respond to that? Well, I think all I can say is with a PTD that originates from the prosecutors. The court has no involvement in the terms of a pretrial diversion. So I'm not sure from the bench perspective that I really have an answer to that, which is kind of what I told you yesterday. When it comes to a PTD, that belongs to the prosecution and not to the court as a plea would. So does anyone else want? Judge Abels, I see you've unmuted there.
Yeah. It's we always hope that you can collect monies from the people that are causing the problems, but reality is there's not much money there, and sometimes you just get the numbers on paper. And Roy's right. You have ethical issues if the judge starts getting involved and trying to raise money. The prosecutors need to do that. Then we need to decide the case when they bring facts to us to make a determination. But once you start getting into the game of trying to raise money as a judge, I think you've got some ethical issues.
Thank you for those comments, Judge Evans. Judge McKenzie, Judge Hoffman. Go ahead, Judge McKenzie. Let's hear from Judge McKenzie. She's in the car, and I'm worried about losing her connection. So, Judge Hoffman, if you'll allow, Judge McKenzie, go ahead.
I appreciate it. My one question is, I know we keep talking about, first of all, I see there's a need. Let me throw that out there. It's obvious that there's a need for more assistance for that office and that they've gone above and beyond. My question is, I always in the back of my mind am thinking, okay, we increase, we do all this, but what if people still don't come? What happens to funds if they're not able to hire who they would like to hire? That's my question.
Mr. McDermott, can you respond to that?
So normally, Judge, we have, this year has been exceptional. We've had board meetings fairly regularly. In the past, we've only had them once a year. The fiscal year for Culberson County, I'll remind everybody that Culberson County is our fiscal agent. So all the money, your interlocal agreements or interlocal agreements with Culberson County pays all of our things. In fact, I think that all legally, and Mr. Colfax may be able to clarify this, but I think that our computers and our furniture and everything legally belong to Culberson County. But what we did last year was we attempted to do a budget reconciliation at the end of the fiscal year to see what money had not been spent. We can certainly have that meeting sometime after the end of the fiscal year and see what those numbers are. You know, I believe we don't currently have an auditor in Culberson County. Judge Arias is shaking his finger at me. So maybe we do, and I'm just not aware of it. But what I do is we have our own account ledgers, just as would be appropriate everywhere. We've got recording in those ledgers of the money that come in from the counties and the money that's expended. I don't know how that relates with the state funding and the state grants. I know the state grants are reimbursements, and so they don't pay Culberson County until after the money is spent. Is that right, Mr. Colfax?
That's right, James. I can give you a little bit of information about how other regional programs handle the kind of situation that Judge McKenzie asked about. Essentially, you know, you all agree on a contribution to the program that's not funded by the state, that which I believe is just under 30% in total of the total budget of the program is not covered by our grants, setting aside the several positions that we're funding at 100% right now under special funding streams. But what counties do is, as James said, at the end of the year takes to do a reconciliation of the actual expenditures. So the county's contribution is based on the budget, which is a planning document, but the actual expenditures are going to vary more or less from the budget. At the end of the year, what most counties with regional programs do is review that reconciliation budget to actuals. And if the counties have made an excess contribution, given the actual expenditures that have been incurred, that can either be applied toward the next fiscal year or returned to the county if it was unused. So I think that can be a regular part of your process to review, especially when there's the problem of recruiting attorneys is particularly difficult in your region, but it's really a statewide problem. So when you might have several positions that stay open for months and months, or sometimes a whole year, that becomes a more important part of the process. So I would encourage you and suggest that any kind of unused budgeted funds that the counties have contributed could either be, would be tracked, of course, by Culberson County, and then through that reconciliation would be either returned or applied to the county's contribution that would be due for the next year.
And if I can just have a side note on that question, on that issue, Judge McKenzie, that budget reconciliation, as you can imagine, because you're doing those things yourself, take a lot of time. I probably spent 2 full weeks in the fall and probably 3 full weeks of spring working through the books and making sure that our reconciliations looked correct. In fact, because of my workload and caseload, I believe that Mr. Colfax was unable to do an essential of his job because I was unable to get the reconciliation done for Culberson County. And that is just an issue of time. So part of the budget proposal is that I have enough time to do those things, that you can get the information in a timely manner so that these decisions can be made effectively rather than late in the game.
Judge McKenzie, does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Any other? Okay, Judge Hoffman.
Well, just going back to the pretrial diversion program, I was just going to point out that across the state, there are lots of jurisdictions that do not have pretrial diversion at all. And I think that it probably is already a very efficient way to generate funds. And I think it's especially important and significant that you have the public defender working with the prosecution on that. So there's some oversight, and it probably makes it more efficient because of that process. Just my 2 cents.
Judge Hoffman. Who's next? Who has a question or comment for discussion regarding the budget? Hearing no further discussion, I'll presume there is none. Judge Hennington.
Yeah, I respect the argument here, but if me approving the budget is saying that Brewster County approves it, I don't have that. I don't have that. This is a doubling, more than a doubling of my budget. So, I understand the argument. I support the public defender concept, but if you're asking me to approve this because Brewster County's approved it, that's not going to happen today.
If I could, just based on our experience with other regional programs, Judge Hennington, I totally understand that any commitment from a particular county regarding its contribution has to run through the county's budget process and budget workshops. A lot of the, I think the interlocal agreement that will be adopted and spell out or updated to spell out any revised county contributions actually would come later in the process after your budget workshops at the county level. So I don't think, if I understand the process, that Judge Ferguson is, proposing an adopted, or at least there's a budget that's been presented for adoption. I don't think that is to be construed as the county's official commitment prior to budget workshops of its contribution. I think it's presented as a planning document so that you have something to run through your budget workshops. Does that sound accurate to you, Judge Ferguson?
I believe that's my understanding as well. It may be best to ask Judge Rodriguez, who has been through this process year after year. I think all of our other judges are relatively new to it. Judge Rodriguez, does that describe how Culberson County has handled the budgeting process?
That's the way we've always handled it, Judge Ferguson. Edwin Colfax is correct. I mean, we still have to go through the budget process and incorporate this if that's what Commissioner's Court wants to do. But I feel that we must move forward and accept this budget as presented.
Thank you, Judge. Judge Henningsen, what else did you have for discussion?
Nothing. I mean, in my mind, it's sort of a tacit approval of this. And what are you going to do when we come back and say we're not going to do it? Now you're going to have to revise your budget again. I mean, you're approving this budget based on the expectations that all of us are going to come through with this money. What happens if we don't? Now we're going to have another meeting to redo the budget that we just approved. It doesn't make any sense to me. So, guys, we're going to work on it. I'm not saying we're not going to work on it. I'm not saying we don't try to support it, but I mean, you're asking us to, find another $90,000.
Does anyone want to respond? Judge Abels looks like, Edwin, go ahead.
Oh, I guess the difference or the clarification regarding how these regional programs typically work through the budget process, that through our experience at TIDC, is that what's on the table is a budget proposal, and I think the budget proposal is offered by the program staff for feedback and evaluation, and it's not. I don't think you're being asked to adopt and commit to a budget so much as adopt a working budget proposal that is then taken back to the particular counties regarding their contribution. So I think I mean, that's how I would characterize this stage of the budget process. You know, we've got a partnership with 5 counties that add some complexity compared to a single county public defender's budget. And every commissioner's court has decisions to make about its contribution and approving its contribution. So that's how I would characterize the process. There is an extra step. For example, if there were, as the budget proposal works its way through the process, if various counties have changes that they need to make or must make or aren't, what have you, there would be an additional step to finalize the budget after the partner counties go through that process. So that's just kind of our perspective on this stage of the budgeting process, is it's really a budget proposal that then has to work its way through the various counties commissioner's court process.
Judge, may I?
Well, Judge Hoffman has his hand up. Let me go to Judge Hoffman.
I can wait my turn. I just had a question.
All right, Mr. McDermott, go ahead. Well, Judge Abels, you had unmuted. Did you want to jump in before I throw over to Mr. McDermott?
Well, you need a number there in Brewster County. I understand that. All of my experience with our public defender's office is the main reason we're using them. I mean, there's a lot of good reasons. The main reason is that the cheapest, it's our best dollar using the public defender's office. And so, what PDO is showing you, and then now you got to figure out, well, if I don't have them, how much is that going to cost? And it tends to cost a lot more to meet your constitutional requirements to provide defense for indigent defendants. So we got to give you a number to take back to your court and see, can we come in with a cheaper number doing something differently? My comment.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. McDermott, you wanted to respond, follow up on Mr. Colfax?
Yes, Judge, a couple things. Number one, each of the county reports includes my best estimate as to what the cases would cost if they were appointed to the private bar under the current indigent defense plans. With a comparison as to what I believe is, well, what is the current contribution? And we know that at the current contribution, I can't take more cases. And what my suggested contribution is based on the current agreement between the counties as each county's contribution. The timeline is best understood backwards, I believe. The budgets starts, or the expenditures under the budget year start October 1st, which means that normally in September, the beginning of September, I show up at commissioners' courts in each county with the interlocal agreement to discuss the issue with the commissioners. That interlocal agreement is the product and is dependent on, what has happened, and that these numbers were included in the budget workshops for the county over the summer. Those numbers then also go back to the TIDC board meeting, which happens in June, in which the TIDC board considers adjustments to their grants. And so the deadline for us to be able to get that information to Mr. Colfax for him to present to his board, I've lost track of time, but it's sometime this month, and I may have missed the deadline on that already, which is why we're having this discussion now. Because those things have to happen in an order. The other part, and I think this is important, and this is what was in the county reports for each county, is that I was offering what I thought to finish off with where Judge Abels was. It was my best effort to give a sense to each county of what our caseload would cost if it was not done through the public defender's office. And I think the savings to the counties are considerable.
Mr. Colfax, I saw you unmute. Did you want to respond to something he just mentioned about TIDC? You're still muted.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, yeah, James is right. We do need to initiate the process on our end. But ultimately, because we have 5 partner counties plus the state, there are 6 parties that have to settle on a budget. And each of those parties has its own budget processes and its own kind of jurisdictional control over their dollars and their contributions. So ultimately, there has to be everybody has to agree. And I think that what's on the table for your consideration today is the working proposal that then goes through the various processes and is adjusted if need be before being finalized. So I think we all kind of are on the same page now about what's where we are in the process, but we do need that. We do need something to initiate the process and work through each of those particular decisions.
Judge Hoffman?
Yeah, well, I'm glad I waited. I was going to say what Judge Abel said, and then I was glad to hear James say that he had put in his budget an estimate of appointed attorney costs. I would just say, in addition to that estimate, perhaps he has some additional information or a way where they could estimate that independent of James's numbers. There may be some formula that they can use, so there can be an independent assessment of that. And just anecdotally, our 5-county district, just because of inflation, et cetera, we just raised on January 1st of this year our court-appointed attorney fee 20% in this 1 year. So that's just an anecdote for you.
Thank you, Judge Hoffman. Who's next? Any questions about the details of the budget as it's been proposed? Everybody's now had a chance to kind of look through it. All right, hearing no further discussion, I will call for the vote on the motion to approve the proposed budget for the next fiscal year. I'm going to ask all those in favor to raise a hand and call out unmuted, please. Aye.
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 Aye. All right, thank you. And all those opposed by like sign, raise of hand and call out aye, please. Judge Hennington, for the record, is noted as an opposition. Anyone else?
Scott Ehlers here. I believe I am a voting member. I did just want to be on the record as abstaining from the vote, just because I feel like there is a conflict since TIDC is the funding organization, a major funding organization. I just wanted to put that on the record.
All right, so Judge Hennington is basically a nay. Mr. Ehlers, on behalf of TIDC, abstains from the vote. So the vote and approval of the budget carries. Back to the top of the agenda here. All right, next up is review of grants to be modified. Mr. McDermott.
This is just discussion purposes. We work under 3 separate grants from TIDC, even though TIDC is the funder for all of them. But this is one of the things, Judge Arias, that we struggled with in this last reconciliation. We work under our general grant, which funds most of the office. We are 2 positions that are funded. Well, actually, there are 4 grants. I'm sorry. There's 2 positions are funded in the ARPA money. They're currently for this upcoming year still funded at 100%. The social worker, the additional social worker was funded still at 100% for I think this upcoming year. And those all 3 will need to be modified, and I'll be working on that with Judge Arias to put the paperwork together for those in order to do the grant proposals up to TIDC. We have a 4th grant that needs to be finished in the next 10 months, and that is a technology grant that we received from TIDC that involved changing our database. One of the cost increases that the new database is a little more expensive than the older one, but I believe is going to be able to give us more real-time data for the counties. And then the steps I already said that Mr. Chambers was working on, which is the automation of our intake process that should increase efficiencies and allow us to better utilize our resources. That grant doesn't need to be changed, but we do need to spend that money, I believe, by March of 2024.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. McDermott regarding the modification of grants? All right. Edwin, who is taking over as lead on the grant committee now that the chief has, as I understand it, is stepping down?
Are you referring to Jeff Burkhart's departure?
No, I'm talking about Raddick's departure.
Oh, okay. Judge Maderi chairs the Grants and Reporting Committee of the Indigent Defense Commission, and she will continue to do that. And Judge Keller, the presiding judge of the Board of Criminal Appeals, will be appointing a new member yet to be determined from our board that will also serve on the Grants and Reporting Committee. I believe Justice Raddick is right now a holdover member of the commission because there hasn't been any formal action yet to replace her. So that's kind of where we are right now.
All right. For those of you who may be wondering, that is the group that applicants for grants or modification grants go before to pitch that grant. It is the group I went to so many years ago with the concept to create it, and the one that Mr. McDermott has gone in front of again and again, asking for additional grants to support the ideas of the department of the office.
And Judge Ferguson, just one other quick point, since we're I think coming to the end of this agenda item. The 3 grant modifications that James mentioned all relate to grants that are 100% funded by TIDC. So we have 2 two-year grants that fund 3 positions fully, and then the smaller technology project. So that shouldn't have any budget impact regarding the county's contributions. I'd also urge you all, I've talked about how this is a 6-part partnership, the state and your 5 counties. And obviously each of those counties has its own budget processes and approvals and commissioner scores. I think that the stability of a program like this really depends on those 5 partners working, all 6 partners, but particularly the 5 county partners working together. So I would encourage you all to continue to have discussions for any reservations or concerns about the budget, to continue to talk about those, because the more clarity that we can get earlier in the process, the better for everyone. Our primary interest is in the stability of this program long term, and that really depends on everybody kind of figuring out what they can do and being in a position to make some good faith commitments to keep the thing operational and doing the good work that it does. So we're always happy to be part of those conversations if you all think it's helpful. And I appreciate everybody's engagement in the process as always.
Thank you, Mr. Colfax. Mr. Ortiz, you have unmuted. You want to join in?
No, Judge.
I was excited to have you jump in.
No, I'm okay.
All right. Any further discussion on the number 7 on the agenda regarding the grant modifications? All right. Number 8 is a review of pause in accepting new cases for discussion. Mr. McDermott, to you.
I've referred to this already in my chief's report, but I did believe that it warranted its own discussion, especially because of the burden on the counties that the pausing cases is taken. Until we have a sense of staffing, that leaves the questions up in the air about the ability to take cases. I've said that in our current situation, I believe that we still cannot take cases full 100%. I believe that, as I've mentioned in my report, there is accrued time that I believe that Mr. Chambers and I both need to start taking in order to be able to fully be invested in the work of this office, energy-wise. And so I'm going to be taking significant time in June in order to use some of my time. I believe that I've probably accrued about 14 weeks. And Mr. Chambers has accrued a little bit less than that because I've been forcing him to take time off. So we do need to get into the summer. Recruiting takes a while. Recruiting for staff especially lawyers who'd be moving from out of the area. In my experience, the last time round, for experienced lawyers, they often have families, and summertime is the easiest time for them to move because they're not in the middle of the school year. And we don't actually have a pool of lawyers here to draw from. There's nobody in the region that is going to apply for a job. There's nobody in the region who's qualified at this point who would also apply for a job. So it would involve moving. So given the timeline, however, until I've got commitment from the counties as to what budget is going to be approved and that I've got the money available, I cannot post the jobs that I'm asking for, which means that we will probably not be posting jobs until September, which means I won't be able to recruit, and hopefully if I were able to recruit appropriately, be able to get people here after Christmas, would be my expectation based on this timeline. Every minute of a delay is a significant delay in the recruiting efforts and being able to staff the office. My hope is that we could evaluate at the end of the summer and see where we're at. I believe that there may be interim measures. We could start taking cases at some point after June, perhaps in some of the smaller counties. And once I have a good sense of the numbers of what we're able to move in the next couple months, we have not moved a significant number of cases in the past 6 weeks, and that has not been what my goal was, but it is the reality. So our numbers are not significantly different than what I presented in March. That is one option, is that when we get our numbers more under control, that we could start talking to some of the smaller counties. The counties could also agree on some method of how to do that, but at that, I think that's a conversation that can be had, but it's not something that I'm prepared for today to make any changes on. I did think the important points for the counties are, I'm willing to discuss options as our numbers get under control. I think there are various options of how to proceed that the counties could have some input on, and recruiting and being able to have a budget set and recruiting in order to get people here. And this is not Austin or Houston or Dallas or El Paso, where lawyers are already living in the area. If I post a job today, my expectation is we would not have somebody for a job posted today. The earliest that I would expect somebody here would be September 1st. And my ability to get people here directly impacts my ability to make new cases. So that's my status update on that.
Any questions or discussion, members? All right, looks like no one has unmuted or raised a hand. That is the last item on our remaining agenda here in our reconvened meeting. Has anyone, Mr. McDermott, signed up for public comment, or is anyone in the waiting room to give public comment?
Judge, on the Friday first half of this meeting, you called for public comment and there was nobody there. There's not been a separate posting, but I believe the postings were left up in Culberson County, and there is nobody in the waiting room.
All right, thank you. That being the case, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Evans with a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Judge Udias with the second. We have reached the bottom of the agenda, and therefore we are adjourned. Thank you for giving us your time, everyone. Have a nice day. Take care.
All right, take care.